Hi guys. I was wondering, since this next expansion coming out is going to be so faction focused, if we could see faction specific legendaries for maybe a shield like Might of the Alliance, or for a horde, Fist of the Horde, and just have them look completely badass.
So legendary items are something we very much look at on a case-by-case basis in terms of both the story that we're trying to tell with, for example, both Dragon Wrath and the Fangs of the Father. And if the story supports it and we find a cool, interesting item opportunity, that's certainly a possibility. That said, because of the work that goes into building those epic experiences, it's something that we'd have to think about very carefully, but everything is always possible.
I love the idea myself.
First off, I wanted to say that the new talent system looks awesome. I'm really looking forward to playing with it. And then I wanted to ask about Death Knight tanks. Right now, Death Knight tanks are in a really bad place. We've got problems with avoidance stats working against Mastery, and then some other things, some of which have been temporarily fixed, like the change to Outbreak, which looks like it's going to get reverted in 5.0. And then we have our two-piece tank scent bonus, which is sort of based on our imminent demise, and this idea that we're constantly bouncing around low health, except that if tanks and healers are doing their job correctly, we shouldn't be that low, which means we don't have a set bonus. So I guess my question is, what are the changes you guys are looking at for fixing some of the problems with Death Knights, and can we get a new two-piece set bonus, such as a heal that goes off when our shield breaks based on the size of our maximum shield that we generated?
Well, I mean, that's a potentially good set bonus. We might use that at some point. I think it's a cool idea. That doesn't mean the current one isn't functional also, however. Now, in terms of Death Knights as a whole, one of the problems they've had, and something we've heard continuously from Death Knights over the course of the expansion, is their susceptibility to spike damage. The nature of the Death Knight tank is that because of their self-healing and their wide array of survivability tools and timers, they actually do require less external healing than any of the other tanks. And so it's a careful balancing act in terms of making sure that they have some weaknesses, right? If you were both not susceptible to spikes and required less healing, then the Death Knight would simply be the best tank all around. Now that said, it's not acceptable really to go from 100% to 0 in a GCD or two. And we've tried, so some of the changes in 4.3 help with the survivability a little bit, remove some of the impediments to managing and juggling the different cooldowns and rune games that you have to do to maximize your survivability. One change that hasn't yet been announced, in the next 4.3 PTR build, the armor bonus from Blood Presence is going up from 30% to 55%. It's actually should be a decent survivability bonus. And beyond that, we are keeping an eye on things, with an eye to the 4.3 raid encounters in particular. We're going to make sure that Death Knights aren't unfairly disadvantaged in any of the encounters. We don't think it's okay to just die in the blink of an eye. That said, part of the Death Knight experience is inherently about being brought really low and then doing awesome things to save yourself, right? And bring yourself back up from 20% to 100% with a couple of quick button presses. And that feels really cool.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I was wondering about Eclipse. It's better than it's ever been, but there's still large periods of time where a balanced druid can be, really low on the damage. And then there's the problem of always sitting in solar when we need to do AoE. Is there anything you guys are planning on doing to address that? Possibly something like the Death Knight ability that generates a whole bunch of unholy power and all their runes?
So the first thing we're doing to address that, this is a 5.0 thing, not a 4.3 thing, is that Hurricane will have a new arcane version that will activate while you are on the other side of the Eclipse bar. So that while you're on that side, you have a good AoE for when you have the arcane eclipse up, and you have a good AoE for while the nature eclipse is up. And that will help to balance things a lot in terms of you're not like, I'm way over on one end and I want to be over on this end and I can't do what I need to do. But in general, the idea that sometimes you're really awesome damage because eclipse active and other times you're low, that's the essential nature of the balance druid. If you don't like that, maybe something else might be a better choice.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Hi there. I have a question about Unholy Death Knights. Our minions don't inherit crit or mastery, and along with that, the gargoyles have a melee strike, which seems useless compared to the ranged attack, and I'm wondering if you have any plans to change either of those.
Sorry, could you repeat the second half of the question? I didn't catch that.
About the gargoyle, they have the melee attack, and the ranged is just so much better, so most people try and spin the gargoyle, so you avoid it altogether.
Understood. Yeah, I mean, the gargoyle is designed to primarily be ranged, and that's something that we can, I think, address on our end to make sure that it's using the strongest attack whenever possible. In terms of stat weightings, yeah, the Unholy Death Knight is probably one of the less successful specs in terms of our goal of making sure that all stats, all secondary stats are equally attractive. That's something that we don't have any short-term plans to currently address. One of the problems with drastically changing stat weights in the middle of an expansion is that it forces people to completely change around their current gear and their reforging and their gemming, and that can be very disruptive. So while the current situation isn't ideal, a heavily disruptive change might be even worse. However, looking ahead to 5.0, we're definitely going to work on making sure that there's greater parity between the value of the secondary stats.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I have been playing since vanilla, and one of my favorite items that I've used even a lot, even till today, is Noggin Fogger Elixir. And I was wondering why we still are not able to mount when shapeshifted as a skeleton.
Basic problem, our animation system does not have animations for all the costumes while you're mounted. And we decided to make a hard, fast rule. You're in some kind of transform, you can't mount. It was the only way to resolve literally hundreds of bugs. Was because we would get a situation where you're mounted in this transform that the animations just don't support properly. It looks stupid, it looks bad in the game, and we just don't feel we want the game to look like that. So we blocked that from existing. And to be fair, we blocked all the costumes instead of some, not others. To have a consistent rule. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm V Wild Spirit from Turleon. First, I'd like to say hello to my guild Evolution, my GMs, officers, and my 9 guild pally friends. You guys are awesome. This is more of a quality of life issue for healers, especially Holy Priests. But I've been a Holy Priest since March 2006, leveled all the way to 80, just Holy, with some discipline for increased DPS. Kata came out, that was nearly impossible, where it took me 10 minutes to do 10 extra minutes to do dailies. It took me hours longer. Is there any plan on making PvE solo more viable for priests, holy priests, and other healers, or is the talent system change gonna answer that?
I would just say it's certainly a lot easier than it was like in vanilla, right? Like if you're a healer and you're doing dailies. I think it's just up to a certain extent to where if you're a healer and you're gemming and chanting for healing and whatnot, how close a DPS are you with like say a full, like a intended DPS spec like Shadow or something? And I mean, we also have dual spec now, whereas before you didn't. So I just don't know if that's like a huge priority to make, you know, holy DPS, you know, more competitive, I guess, if we're doing dailies.
Not so much competitive, but viable. I mean, I don't expect to go holy and pull out 20k DPS on Ragnaros. I mean, I could do that
Right.
with Shadow. I have dual specs. I've done a Raid Knight in all 3 specs. I'm just wondering if it could be more viable, and if you guys...
Well, holy also has a DPS chakra too that you could use that increases your damage. So, I mean, it's something we could talk about. I'm just not sure.
I mean, one of the dangers we have to keep in mind when we're trying to balance that is PvP, right? I mean, if healers can output DPS that is greater than a certain percentage of what a pure DPS class can, that can also cause potential imbalances, and so we have to be aware of that. In the meantime, obviously, as noted, being able to dual spec into DPS specs and also having much more hybridized gear for the hybrid casters should make it easier for everyone to be able to find something they can use to do their dailies.
Not to mention, a lot of the dailies are literally designed for somebody, regardless of what spec or class you are. And in some cases, like in the Firelands, there were dailies that were easier to do if you were a healer, because you had to heal an NPC that everybody else took a lot longer to do. It was easier for you to do. You could do it instantly. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, so I'm a rogue, so I just want to say first, thanks for the legendary. It's awesome.
Rogues represent.
You're welcome.
So my question is regarding the new introduction of the Windwalker monk class, and also the formalization of cat druids as an official spec. With all these new melee DPS hybrids, what do you guys have planned to make sure that rogues are competitive as the only pure melee class, or we can't really bring some of the utility that, you know, a healer or an off-spec, you know, they can bring those abilities. What do you guys have planned for rogues to make sure that we're still bring some utility?
Well, I think we've moved away from a model where being a pure meant that you simply, you know, did way more damage than everyone else, and that only hybrids brought utility. I think everyone brings a little bit of everything. Right now, some of the best reasons to bring a rogue, aside from their excellent top-tier melee damage, also include things like, you know, the ability to fan crippling poison onto a bunch of things, or excellent interrupts, or stuns. Those are things that are useful in a number of encounters and will continue to be useful in a number of encounters going forward, as well as, of course, in PvP. I think we're clearly going to try to maintain the rogue gameplay niche. You know, just because you have a monk class that has some maybe similar mechanics in terms of energy bar being melee, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to be stealthy. They're not going to have rogue poisons. They're not going to have all the little tricks that make being a rogue awesome and make rogues rogues.
Thank you.